Times. Thank you very much. Joining us now, a Republican lawmaker who's not, we should say, a reflexive critic of the president, Illinois Congressman Adam Kinzinger, is, however, sharply critical on this episode as well as the decisions leading up to it in the past administration. And as a veteran of the war, a current Air National Guard member, he speaks from experience. Quoting now from his piece today in Foreign Policy magazine, quote, "The Taliban cannot be trusted. Not before, not now, not ever. It's shameful that our past president, Donald Trump, negotiated a deal with the terrorist organization. It's appalling that our current president, Joe Biden, underestimated the impact of his withdrawal announcement and the chaos that would ensue. Worse, the lack of strength being shown by our commander-in-chief is embarrassing." Congressman Kinzinger, thanks for being with us. But before we get to the foreign policy, what you wrote, I just want to talk to you about this fallen U.S. Marine that we're learning about tonight. It's really the first person whose name we know. His family spoke to CNN. Riley McCullum is his name. His wife has a baby due in just 3 weeks. Wanted to be a Marine his whole life, so much so that he carried around a toy rifle in his diapers and cowboy boots as a toddler, which I love the image of that. This was his first deployment. When you see it in black and white, who this person was and the devastation that, his family will feel for the rest of their lives, it's just horrific.
It is. It's obviously incredibly sad, and as we get the rest of the names, it's going to be repeated over and over, and our sorrow will pale in comparison to the families. It's, it is a reminder. I had heard somebody earlier mention, while it's extremely tragic that these 13 people were killed, what were they killed doing? They were killed saving lives, saving American lives, saving green card holders' lives, saving the lives of people that, worked with us in Afghanistan. And so, while, of course, we certainly, wish this was far different, I think it's important to note that this was something that, people often say is that death in vain. It's a death we certainly wish didn't happen. But I think you can look at what we were accomplishing and say there are many lives that are going to be touched in generations because of this.
Well, and also, I do think it's important to point out as well that they were standing there exposed, knowing that there was a likely attack. Knowing that there was very specific intelligence. In fact, the U.S. had warned for Americans to get away from that area because it was not safe, and yet they were standing there, if the images from days past are any indication, shoulder to shoulder with their fellow Marines and others, knowing what, any second could happen in that crowd. The White House is saying that President Biden has been warned another attack is likely as the mission enters its most dangerous period. How concerned are you about that? And is there anything you think that can be done that may not be being done?
I don't know if there's anything that we can do that we're not. Kind of looking at where we are in this moment, unfortunately having to rely on the Taliban, there's a series of bad choices that led us to this moment. But it is a very real threat. I've heard from people on the ground there, as well as, of course, what's being reported in open source. And this is very reminiscent of what we were hearing a day or two prior. Now, hopefully, with the knowledge of this, with a perimeter that's been extended a little more, and with knowing how it happened last time, we may be better prepared. But this is certainly probably, as you've been saying here, one of the more dangerous moments probably in the entire Afghanistan war in the next few days.
After this attack, some people in your party have called for President Biden to be impeached or resigned. Most of those people never spoke up when President Trump made the deal that President Biden has been following through on. But I do want to ask you something you said earlier today on CNN, that some people on his national security team should resign. If they don't resign, should President Biden fire them, in your mind?
Yeah, I think there needs to be accountability. And I think, frankly, President Biden needs to take better ownership of this. People have used the Kennedy Bay of Pigs analogy where he took full responsibility and actually his poll numbers recovered. Because that's what Americans want. They want leaders who take responsibility. So a firing or a removal or a resignation of a national security leader team should not be a kind of a scapegoat. Ultimately, President Biden owns this, but we need to know what happens. And as far as, my party's knee-jerk reaction, look, this is tragic. I agree that there was a ton of things done wrong. Calling for the impeachment of a president is not in line with what the Constitution prescribes. And secondarily, let's give it at least a potato or two, before we start focusing on that only. I've been very critical of President Biden in this moment because my hope is through that criticism we would be able to change kind of how we were doing things. I've been very critical of the prior president. But this country really needs to get back to where we see ourselves as Americans before, party members. And unfortunately, I think that is flipped around at this moment.
Yeah, you are consistent in your criticism and your praise, which speaks to your favor. I do want to read something from your op-ed for Foreign Policy. You said, "We have the strength, power, and fortitude to stand up for freedom, and we must take that stand now by pushing back on the arbitrary deadline the president has set for withdrawal, securing the airport, and expanding our efforts to ensure the safety and security of all Americans, Afghans with special visas, and our Afghan allies in danger. Anything less is unacceptable and un-American." What would you do differently at this point? I spoke to, former Chairman Mike Rogers yesterday, who talked about expanding the perimeter. To me, and I'm certainly no expert, but that only seems to, I'm not sure what that actually does on a tactical level. It seems to just need more. First of all, you would need more American troops there. You would expose them to just a greater number of people over a greater massive area. What do you think should be done?
Yeah, I mean, look, you're exactly right in that. All you're doing is basically pushing out the potential where people gather. Look, I mean, if I could go back, 2 weeks, I would have basically secured the city of Kabul and told the Taliban not to come in. They weren't going to come in until the government collapsed, until we had everybody out. But given where we are now, and given that there's already a wind-down detonation of American equipment, we're running out of options. But I think the bottom line is, as botched as this has been, the one way we can redeem a really bad situation, and not redeem it, but I guess try to do something good, is to say that every American that needs to get out can get out, and every Afghanistan civ. Look, I may be wrong here, but the indications we're getting on the ground have been very different than what the administration is briefing. They keep talking about we're still letting Afghan civs in. What we're hearing from people on the ground is that Afghan civs are being kicked out of the airport, and there actually are planes sometimes with open seats. So, look, we'll be able to figure out what's going on in a few weeks when we have hearings and stuff, but I certainly hope I am wrong and that they are still allowing these folks in the airport to leave as long as we have time to do that.
Yeah, Congressman Kinzinger, I appreciate your time. Thank you.